مساء الخير وأهلا بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من واشنطن أونلاين. خصصت مجلة لوبوان الفرنسية صفحتها الأولى لتصف الرئيس التركي رجب طيب أردوغان بأنه عميل روسيا داخل حلف الناتو، في إشارة من المجلة الفرنسية إلى صفقة أو اتفاقية ما عقدت ما بين أنقرة وموسكو، تتنازل من خلالها موسكو عن بعض الامتيازات أو المناطق للجانب التركي في سوريا، مقابل أن يقوم الرئيس التركي أردوغان بحظر صفقة أو اتفاقية أو خطوة انضمام فنلندا والسويد إلى حلف الناتو. فما حقيقة وجود اتفاقية روسية تركية تسهل الغزو التركي لكل من منبج ورفعت، وكيف ممكن أن تكون المواقف الأمريكية مقابل هكذا خطوة تركية؟ هذا ما نبحثه في حلقة اليوم من واشنطن أونلاين. أهلا وسهلا بك سيد نيكولاس هاريس، وأبدأ الحلقة اليوم مع حضرتك. نعرف أن هناك تهديدات تركية جاءت على لسان الرئيس التركي أردوغان تقول أنه سيقوم بتوسيع ما يسميه المنطقة الآمنة في الشمال السوري، ولكن حتى قبل أن تنطلق مثل هذه العمليات رسميا هناك تصعيد، هناك قصف كل الفترة الماضية على مناطق من الشمال السوري، تحديدا المناطق الخاضعة لسيطرة قوات سوريا الديمقراطية. هل هذا هو ما يهدد به الرئيس أردوغان، أم ستتطور هذه التهديدات إلى حملة عسكرية على غرار ما رأيناه عام 2019؟
Well, it is clear that Turkish President Erdogan has a political motive in mind in trying to saber rattle against the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Autonomous Administration of Northeast Syria, and by extension, US military forces and other coalition partners in Northeast Syria. Turkey has an ongoing military operation in northern Iraq, which is occurring with the tacit support of the Kurdistan Regional Government in northern Iraq. And we can tell that there is a motivation on the part of Erdogan to try to see if he can get more from NATO, now in the context of NATO's expansion, to try to include Finland and Sweden. We have seen Erdogan make statements that have been, well, in many ways anti-NATO and almost supporting Russia. And he's also confronted Greece and France, which are also his NATO allies. So Turkish foreign policy at this moment is quite unsettled, because there's a potential election, perhaps as early as 2023 inside Turkey. And with the state of the Turkish economy at the moment, it is not clear that Erdogan would win. So he has to turn to something else, and he has to turn the Turkish people's attention somewhere else. And it is, unfortunately, a common tool in his kit to attack the Kurds, so to speak.
نعم، ولكن هل هكذا عملية ممكنة الآن في ظل الأوضاع الاقتصادية المتردية داخل تركيا، وفي ظل ما تعانيه الميليشيات التي تدعمها وتدربها تركيا، ومن المفترض أنها ستعتمد عليها في هذه العملية القادمة؟ يعني آخر الأخبار الآتية من واحدة من المناطق المهمة التي تسيطر عليها تركيا وميليشياتها رأس العين هي أن هناك اقتتال داخلي عنيف بين الميليشيات نفسها، اضطرت تركيا للتدخل لفض الخلافات التي أدت أصلا إلى مقتل عدد من قادة هؤلاء الميليشيات. هل بإمكان تركيا أن تذهب بهذه الميليشيات وبهذه الأوضاع الآن إلى عملية جديدة في الشمال السوري؟
Well, Turkey will have to depend on its local partners, its local Syrian partners. And as is clear, the Syrian militias that are supported by Turkey in the Euphrates Shield Zone, in occupied Afrin, in these areas that include sort of Tal Abyad and Ras Al Ain. These forces aren't united, and they aren't particularly effective on the battlefield if they don't have significant Turkish military support. And so it is clear that if, for example, Turkey wanted to move to capture, say, Tal Rifat, or even to try to break into the larger autonomous administration Northeast Syria zone, in areas around Qamishli, for example, or Kobani even, you'd have to have significant Turkish military support, airstrikes, tanks, artillery. And right now, there's a major war in Ukraine. And Turkey has a lot of demands placed upon it by NATO. Now, Turkey is not at war with Russia, but Turkey is under immense pressure. And it is also, at the time being, conducting a military campaign in northern Iraq. And this all costs a lot of money. And at a time when the Turkish economy is weak, the Turkish lira continues to lose value against the American dollar. It is uncertain if Turkey can actually carry off such an operation.
نعم، يعني بحسب ما نقرأ الآن من تصريحات أمريكية تأتي حتى على لسان وزير الخارجية الأمريكي أنتوني بلينكين، يبدو أن إدارة جو بايدن متشددة في رفضها للعملية التركية المحتملة، ولكن أيضا إدارة دونالد ترامب تقول وكانت تؤكد، والتقينا هنا في هذا البرنامج مع عدد من مسؤولي إدارة ترامب للملف السوري، وهم يؤكدون أن إدارة ترامب أيضا لم تعطي تركيا الضوء الأخضر، وكانت متشددة في رفضها للعملية التي جرت في عام 2019. هل من الممكن أن تمضي تركيا قدما بهذه العملية دون ضوء أخضر أمريكي مع كل هذا الاعتراض الأمريكي؟
It's possible that Erdogan could unilaterally decide to conduct a military operation in northeast Syria. However, this is a very tenuous moment, and Erdogan essentially is trying to play Putin off of Biden. And the Russians are consolidating their presence in Syria, in Western Syria. The Russians are having challenges logistically to continue to maintain a forward operating presence in Northeast Syria. And so the game, so to speak, in Northeast Syria will increasingly be dependent upon the United States. And the Turks have been quite effective, especially during the Trump administration, of playing the Russians off against the United States. That's far more difficult now, first of all, in terms of the geopolitical context, but also because President Biden and the advisors that he has around him aren't in the mood to give Erdogan what he wants, and certainly not to give him an election gift.
نعم سيد نيكولاس، ما هو الموقف الروسي برأيك من هذه التهديدات التركية؟
Russia would like to have an equilibrium in Syria. It's clear that the Russians intend to maintain a long-term presence in Hamamin and in Tartus, so in Western Syria, as well as in areas around Damascus as best they can. The Russian effort to try to turn Qamishli into the sort of third major base is at a sort of delicate point because of the cost. And the Russians, because of the war in Ukraine, really don't want to have, to put it bluntly, any troubles, which means they don't really want a conflict with Turkey, and they really don't want a conflict with Israel, between Israel and Iran. And when it comes to the United States, so long as the US has a military presence in Northeast Syria, the Russians aren't incentivized to test any of this. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And the lowest hanging fruit, in all honesty, for Turkey would be to try to conduct operations in Western Syria, in the area around Aleppo, potentially in return for a deal with the Russians whereby the Turks would agree not to upset the balance in Western Syria too much. But that would upset, obviously, the Assad government that doesn't want further Turkish incursions inside Syria. Damascus, the Assad government, views Turkey as a long-standing rival and considers the increased Turkish presence in Syria as anathema, for the frank reason being that the Assad regime doesn't believe that Turkey will ever withdraw from territory it takes in northern Syria. So Russia has a very delicate diplomatic dance that's engaged in, and it's doubtful that the Russians will try to do more than sort of nibble at the edges of a potential Turkish operation.
نعم، نشهد هذه الأيام أيضا تهديدات تركية ولهجة تركية تصعيدية من الرئيس أردوغان تحديدا تجاه اليونان. أيضا تم وقف كل المحادثات الدبلوماسية مؤخرا مع الجانب اليوناني. عاد التوتر ليصل إلى أعلى مستوياته بين أثينا وأنقرة. هل هذا جزء، كل ما يحدث اليوم جزء من يعني تصعيد كلامي تركي فقط لا أكثر قبل الانتخابات؟
Erdogan is trying to make a statement to his people, which is sort of these countries like France, like Greece, like the United States, which is viewed as sort of the proxy commander of the Kurds, that have been vilified in the Turkish media, that he's basically saying that I stand up to all of them, and that Erdogan is saying to his people, that he represents. He's a living avatar or symbol of Turkish nationalism and Turkish vigor and a new, strong Turkey. So all of this plays into his electoral messaging.
نعم نيكولاس، هل ممكن أن يقود هذا التصعيد التركي الأخير إلى عقوبات أمريكية، حزمة جديدة من العقوبات على تركيا، أو إعادة النظر في صفقة بيع طائرات F-16 لتركيا والتي وافق عليها جو بايدن مؤخرا؟ خاصة يعني اليوم هناك ضغوطات كبيرة، حملات ضغط كبيرة خاصة من اللوبي اليوناني للتحرك بهذا الاتجاه ضد تركيا في واشنطن.
Well, the US Congress is very much divided on the issue of whether the sale of F-16 should continue at all to Turkey, despite the Biden administration's attempts to force that deal through. And the more that Erdogan seems like an adversary more than an ally to the United States, the more difficult it is for him to try to strong-arm the Biden administration into a deal like for the F-16s.
شكرا جزيلا لك سيد نيكولاس هاريس، كنت معنا من واشنطن عبر شبكة سكايب.
Thank you very much and all the best.